chairperson of our Federal Council, who joined us in the negotiations today, and Solly Msimanga, our provincial leader. So I'll hand over to Helen, who will just go through the statement with you in terms of what the outcome of the negotiations were today.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for being here at short notice. I'm sure after your shifts have ended, but having been a journalist myself, I know there's no such thing as a shift with a running story. So with a running story, your shift runs for as long as the story runs on a particular day. So I do appreciate your coming out very much indeed. Secondly, I want to describe this by means of a progress report, and I hope that it does include progress, because we aren't finding each other yet, and there is still quite a big chasm, but we did make some progress today, which I think at least is a step in the right direction. And our door certainly remains open to continued discussion until we do find a resolution in terms of the statement of intent. Now, I don't know if you recall, have you all been following the story, or are you new to it? Because it'll depend on how deeply I go into it. The statement of intent was the document we signed on the 14th of June. Fikile Mbalula and myself signed this document, and it was the product of about 3.5 weeks of intense negotiation. And this statement of intent was intended to be the framework within which all the negotiations subsequently to set up governments would happen. So the statement of intent is a very important document because it covers the broad rules of the game by which every single government that we set up of provincial unity and of national unity would be done. And as you know, there's been a lot of discussion, and ultimately last weekend we reached agreement on the composition of a government of national unity. We very quickly reached agreement on a government of provincial unity in KwaZulu-Natal. That happened very quickly. The terms of the agreement were there. The IFP was the largest party. It completely honored the agreement, and we could very quickly set up a government and allocate seats because everyone was acting in good faith. We've hit a bit of an impasse, if I can call it that, in Gauteng. And it is all rooted in the good faith implementation of the statement of intent in the Gauteng context. And we have required, obviously, because we believe that signed agreements have to have some kind of value, we have kept by this, and we have required that other parties keep by it as well. Now, I would like to take you through a statement that I've written, and one good thing about my having been a journalist before, again, is that I can write statements very quickly. So I've written a statement here that I would like to take you through. This is not an easy matter, so I'm not patronizing you when I stop to explain certain things, because if you're new to the story and you're coming in cold to the story, you will need some background to what we're saying here. But I've tried to be as self-explanatory as possible. That document is going to be sent to you by Franco. And you want me to be a bit louder? Okay. Right. That document is going to be sent to you by Franco. Have you sent it, Franco, to them? Not yet. Okay, so I'm going to take you through it. It would make it a lot easier if you could actually follow it while I'm taking you through it, but it is what it is, so we have to do it this way. Despite some progress in negotiations today, the DA and the ANC have not yet reached agreement on the composition of a government for Gauteng on the basis of the National Statement of Intent signed on June the 14th. Now, on the basis of the statement of intent, Solly Msimanga wrote a letter, this letter, of which we have copies here, I think, to state how we saw the statement of intent fairly being implemented in Gauteng. As I say, it was very easily and fairly implemented in KwaZulu-Natal, and this was Solly's letter on the 22nd of June explaining how we saw and understood the translation of the statement of intent into a government of provincial unity in Gauteng. So setting out the DA's approach to constituting a government of provincial unity, The DA provincial leader, Solly Msimanga, on my left, proposed an approach to implementing the statement of intent in the Gauteng context. He wrote the letter on the 22nd of June, 2024. He has received an acknowledgement of receipt by Mr. Ngisa, who he wrote it to, and Mr. Ngisa is the Gauteng Provincial Secretary of the ANC. But he has not received any kind of full reply. Now, Solly's letter refers to the crucial clauses in the statement of intent. And if there are two clauses you need to look at, my voice is going to give in because I've been very sick. Won't you just come a bit forward if you want to keep the sound going? There are two clauses in the statement of intent, and they were clause 16 and clause 19. Can I have some water, Ray? Clause 16 and clause 19. Those are crucial clauses in the statement of intent. Clause 16 defines the principles of proportionality, inclusiveness, and respecting the will of the voters in the outcome of the election. Those are three critical principles that underline the formation of a government. Now, that makes sense because you want to respect the will of the voters, which means you have to respect the outcome of the election. We have a proportional representation system, so proportionality is a very important component of our entire electoral system. And then we also agreed that we should try and look at inclusiveness. Now, the other clause was clause 19, which defines the concept of sufficient consensus. Sufficient consensus is a uniquely South African concept that was coined at CODESA in those CODESA negotiations, and I'm old enough to have been at CODESA and here. And in CODESA, basically, there was the application of this concept called sufficient consensus, which we have defined for the very first time very clearly in the statement of intent. So the proportionality clause, which is clause 16, and the sufficient consensus clause, clause 19, were particularly important, and Solly referred to those clauses in his letter to Mr. I've got to just get it right here, sorry, to Mr. Ngisa of the ANC in the province. Now, up till now, the ANC has been prepared to offer the DA a maximum of 3 out of 10 cabinet seats. That is 3 out of 10 cabinet seats, without telling us how many seats they intended to take for themselves and how many they intended to give to other parties. Now, obviously, that's a completely unsatisfactory situation. In the election, the ANC was only slightly bigger than the DA. In the election, the ANC got 34% of the vote, and the DA got 28% of the vote. So we were literally 6 percentage points behind the ANC. We are almost the same size. And so as we go into a government of provincial unity, we needed to take each other into confidence, and it wasn't a situation in which the ANC would constitute a government and invite us in on their terms. It was a situation in which we would respect each other's proportion of the electoral result and agree on the composition of an executive. That was the basis on which it was done. The ANC said, right, we want to give you 3 out of 10 cabinet seats. We wanted to know, well, what do you plan to do with the rest? Because unless we know how many you're planning to take for yourself and whether you're planning to give any to other parties, that is crucially important information for us, and it's information that we need. That's obviously essential to building trust and to ensuring that we get clarity on the composition of government. Now, today in the discussions, it was very useful because the ANC conceded that they had intended to allocate 3 cabinet seats to the DA and keep 7 plus the Premier, that is 8, for themselves. Now, clearly, that would be a violation of the proportionality clause. It would not in any way be proportional, not even wildly. It would not reflect the will of the voters, and it would not reflect inclusiveness. So it was completely out of kilter with Clause 16 of the Statement of Intent. And we said, sorry, 8-3 is not acceptable. Today, they did agree to go down from 7 plus the Premier to 6 plus the Premier, which would be 7 out of 11, and give 1 seat to the IFP and keep us at 3. Now, we have no problem at all with the IFP coming in. In fact, the IFP was an initial signatory to the Statement of Intent, and we believe they should be there in good faith. So we have no problem with that at all. But it is still wildly out of proportion to give the ANC 6 plus 1, the DA 3, which is less than half of what the ANC has got, although we're almost the same size electorally, and the IFP 1. So we said that is not helpful. It does not meet Clause 16, and it is not appropriate, and we cannot agree to that. So the ANC offered to reduce the 7 to 6, retain the DA at 3, and give the IFP or the PA, they said, 1. We welcome the IFP's possible inclusion, but point out that this is still far short of the requirements of Clause 16 of the National Statement of Intent. We, as the DA, are prepared to enter the government of provincial unity in Gauteng on the basis of a power-sharing partnership to reflect the will of the voters in Gauteng. But we are not prepared to be co-opted by the ANC on their terms alone, acting as if the ANC still has an overall majority in Gauteng, which it does not. We cannot agree to be taken hostage in a government of provincial unity in which only one party dictates the terms. As far as committee chairs in the Gauteng legislature are concerned, the proposal was that the DA would take 6 out of a total of 17. And we were prepared to accept this allocation despite a significant shortfall on the basis of the executive reflecting the letter and the spirit of the Declaration of Intent. Our door remains open to further negotiations when the ANC is genuinely committed to treating us as a party that is almost the same size as they are in Gauteng. We will again come to the table in an atmosphere of mutual respect and negotiate in good faith and seek to build trust between the parties. There is still work to do. We must work through the Statement of Intent to ensure that we have the same understanding of that statement and that we don't start arguing later about what various clauses mean. And we must reach an agreement for the genuine sharing of power so that we can properly serve the voters and act in the interests of the electorate and respect the way they voted. So that is our statement. It is going to be coming to you, and I would be very grateful if Janine could distribute. What is that, Janine?
That's the statement.
That's the statement. Okay, and if you could just bring me, I've run out of tissues for my cold. So sorry. Okay, well, here's one. Sorry, here's one. This is the one I lost at the beginning.
Solly, do you want to add anything?
No, I think we'll field in questions.
All right. Questions?
Oh, sorry, I've been very sick, so that's why I'm blowing my nose. Okay, was that clear? Was that clear to everybody? It's very technical, so I don't expect you to.
All right. Please go ahead.
Tilo from Kaya 959 News. I just want to find out, you say that you guys are still
the government hasn't ground to a standstill, we have to reach an agreement. In most countries with coalitions, they take a very long time to negotiate a government. In some countries, 3 months, in others, 6 months, in others, up to a year, and in one case, up to 2 years, but we don't intend inflicting that on Gauteng. So I will clear my diary and do whatever it takes to get back into a room where people are prepared to negotiate in good faith and reflect the will of the voters and the agreement that we signed on the 14th of June. So that means we have to get a fair share of government, and we have to ensure that we are not treated as an add-on, but as a respected partner that the voters voted for in significant numbers.
Heidi?
Heidi Jaffa from ENCA.
Oh, that's Heidi.
I just wanted to ask if this at all affects anything on a national level, seeing as though you haven't agreed on a provincial level. And then secondly, you keep mentioning that you are willing to get back into a room with the ANC to further negotiate. Did you get a sense that they are willing to further negotiate? And what would you do if the ANC forms a government in Gauteng with the other two political parties that they could form a government with?
Look, we remain open to engaging with the ANC. Whether there was a sense that this is the end of the road, certainly from our end, we don't take it that is the case. But if it is the end of the road on their side, then it will be the end of the road. We will take our opposition seat, and we will see then what happens. How we engage going forward. If we're taking our opposition seat, is something that we will then communicate from a caucus perspective. We'll communicate with the media. There will be a full briefing on that, in due time. We are now giving everybody an update of where we are, and if the ANC sees the discussion to where we are as the end of the road, then obviously they will make that announcement, and they will then continue with government. And whether they're forming it with any other political party, we're still not clear what is the situation. We're only reporting on what has been said in relation to the conversations we were having with them.
The national KZN impact.
KZN, yeah. So the conversation from a national perspective, is still intact. Or the pact, if you like, or the agreement remains, as is. But as Helen has said, there are certain clauses that needs to still be ironed out, and there has been a commitment to then iron out some of the clauses that are coming from the statement of intent. But be that as it may, I can tell you right now that as things stand at this point in time, there hasn't been any adjustments on a national or at the provincial level, and this is where we are at this point in time.
So just to make that clear, at this stage you can see Gauteng as a standalone in all of this. So the national and KZN deals or agreements are not dependent on Gauteng reaching an agreement. Further questions? Sir?
I just want to find out from Mr. Mango, what would be the representation in terms of numbers across the board, the operating order to start the satisfaction and reflect as a fair representation? That's the first question. The second question is the DA, with the DA mind, if other political parties besides the ANC and DA join this, of course, besides the if the EFF of
Okay. All right. So let me make it very, very clear that when we wrote to the ANC, initially, we said the DA is prepared to even go up to 3 positions, but with the spirit of allowing other political parties to come in. So it shouldn't be the DA gets this 3, the ANC gets the lot, and then everybody else gets to be kept on the side. We were saying let's deal with the proportionality. But given the fact that we were of the mind that you want to have inclusivity, we were prepared to then go. In fact, we said we'll go as low as 3, as long as on the other side, the ANC is also now willing to accommodate other parties. So you don't then say, I'm taking this as my own, and that's where it ends. And if there is anybody else to be accommodated, they will come from this, little share that is remaining. I think that goes against the spirit that Helen was talking to. So this is where we were. And we're still prepared to then engage with any other political party, as long as that political party, doesn't go against the constitution or the rule of law, or wanting to work in terms of advancing, the service delivery in terms of stopping corruption and ensuring that Gauteng in this instance works the way that it's supposed to work. So we're not closing any door to any political party, and certainly the DA just is asking to be consulted, as a partner, or potential partner in this case, to then say, if you are going to be introducing other political parties and you want them to be in cabinet, obviously then we need to then talking about the mechanisms of bringing that in. We also spoke about the possibility, because nobody has won elections. How do you then make decisions? And this is what we were trying to put on the table, to then say, what is the mechanism of decision making? And how do we then, not become rubber stamping, body within the cabinet, to make sure that there is robust engagement, and when there is disagreement, there's mechanisms put in place to how you deal with those disagreements. That's what we've been putting on the table. But, at this point, it's just been about the numbers and the position, to then say, you get 3, we get 7, and, we'll see whether we're introducing one, and if we're introducing one, it will be this one or that one. But it's not talking about, but what if there's more that is coming? What do you do then? So do you then just shove them on the side and say you just get committee chairs, or you bring them into the cabinet? Because for us, when you're talking about government of inclusivity, it talks about people that are decision makers. It's not people who are just doing an oversight role on the other side, but the people who are sitting in the room when budgets are decided. People who are sitting in the room talking about how departments are supposed to be performing. That's for us, when you start to talk about building an inclusive government. But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case, in the talks that we've had so far. Hannah?
Yes, thanks, Solly. If you look at the maths and you add the DA's 22 seats, 28% of the vote, to the ANC's 28 seats in Gauteng, which is 34% of the vote, you will see how close we are, and we could easily form a government just between us. And that would, if we worked out proportionately out of 10 cabinet seats, keeping the Premier on the side, it would mean that we would get 4.7, and the ANC would get the rest. Obviously, that includes the Premier. Now, we have not demanded 4.7 rounded up to 5. We've said we're quite happy to have 4. That would be a nice ceiling for us, and we're completely happy to have 4 out of 10, even though the ANC would have what we believed would be 5, because we always believed that the IFP would be included in good faith, because they helped us get a government of provincial unity in KwaZulu-Natal. And we're not fair weather friends in the DA. If they've done us a good service by sticking to the agreement in KwaZulu-Natal, we need to do the same in Gauteng. That's how we see it. So we believe that they should be there. So what we were proposing was 5 for the ANC, 4 for us, and 1 for the IFP, in relation to the proportionality clause, the inclusivity clause, and reflecting the will of the voters clause. That would have been fair. Not quibbling over numbers, but saying there's some principles that underlie the numbers that have to be respected. Right. The ANC said, no, we'll give you 3, but we're going to bring in other parties. We said, what other parties? Please tell us. That is in good faith. If you're establishing a government of provincial unity, we need to know, because we have some red lines. We actually do. And they wouldn't tell us, and today they said, no, well, actually the plan was to give you 3 and to take 7. So we could see that they'd been in bad faith, which was a huge problem for us. And then they said, okay, we can give now 1 to the IFP, but then you have to still keep 3, and we take 6. It doesn't work that way. There's got to be fairness. And it is very hard for the ANC to come to terms with losing power. I understand that. But they got 34%. They didn't get 50% plus 1. And that means that they can't dictate the terms. Yes, they are still the biggest party in the government of national unity, but we're not far behind them, and this has to be a power-sharing arrangement. This has to be an arrangement in which we respect each other. Now, Solly wrote on the 22nd of July to the ANC secretary in Gauteng and said, this is how we should do it. We should start with all of the positions. If you're looking at speaker and deputy, that makes it 13. Speaker and deputy and premier and 10 cabinet ministers. That makes it 13. On the basis of proportionality, you get 7, we get 6. We already agreed that the speaker and the premier would go to the ANC. That's a big concession, because really it should be one goes to the ANC and one goes to us. So we made a big concession to take it to the ANC and say, right, you can have the premier and the speaker, and we took the deputy speaker. Okay, so from those 13, the ANC's got 2 and we've got 1. And now we get to the cabinet, and they're 10. We said, all right, let's take proportionately. Plus the premier, you take 6, which is 5 cabinet seats plus the premier, because he is part of the cabinet, and we take 5. And then what we do is we each give up 1 to accommodate another party. So we want to bring in the IFP. The ANC gives us the first seat because it was proportional. Then we want to bring in another party. We give up 1 seat until it's inclusive. And Solly said that because the cabinet is limited to 10, we couldn't bring in more than 3 other parties without completely undermining the proportionality aspect of it. That was the fair proposal. The ANC never intended, in fact, as we found out today, to bring in any other smaller parties. They were using that as a smokescreen to hide from us the fact that they wanted 7 and they wanted to give us 3. Now, really, we cannot have the wool pulled over our eyes in that way. And that is, for us, extreme bad faith and would actually justify us closing the door. But we know that 28% of Gauteng voters voted for us, and they expect us to make a very big effort to have a proportional share in government to serve all the people of Gauteng and to represent the will of the voters, which we will do. But it's got to be done on a fair and respectful basis, reflecting the agreement that we signed. We signed an agreement. We take it seriously. It is a commitment. It's like a contract, and it has to be respected. And we have to, where there is confusion about the clauses, as for example, there seems to be about the clause on sufficient consensus, because the person from the ANC who explained it did not explain it in terms of the clause that exists there. So we are entirely happy to enter into good faith negotiations, but not to have the wool pulled over our eyes.
My question about the EFF.
No, look, we are prepared to go into any government of provincial unity or national unity with parties that respect and defend the Constitution, and the EFF is not one of those.